Welcome to Take It from the Ironwoman. My name is Susanne Müller, your host and the Ironwoman. This podcast is about empowering yourself and others to make real changes in the world. You will hear from everyday, smart, sophisticated, hip people like you and me. Not everybody has to be an Ironwoman to impress the world. Together, we will learn from the sports and business leaders how you can become a more successful person as an entrepreneur or a leader. It's one step at a time, one day at a time. Take your steps now. Take your big steps now. Join me on this journey to success. Take it from the Ironwoman. We only have special guests, and today we go to New Zealand. Listen to Robert Tighe. When you read his biography, it says Robert has been working with words for 20 years, initially as an award-winning journalist and more recently as a storytelling consultant and #1 leading bestseller ghostwriter. What is a ghostwriter? Who are you? What do you do? Where do you come from?
Very good. Okay, that's a lot to cover. I'll try and answer all those questions. Yes, based in New Zealand for the last 20 years, but the accent might be a giveaway. You had Val Quinn on recently.
Yes.
I'm another Irish person. I'm from Ireland originally, moved over here 20 years ago to marry a New Zealand woman and been here since. I've been working with words for around the same time. I started out as a journalist in Ireland before I moved over here, and I spent 15 years as a sports journalist. I worked doing feature writing, mainly interviewing athletes and a lot of extreme athletes. I worked with Red Bull for 5 years. A lot of extreme sports people who were incredible people to deal with because they generally have incredible stories to tell because as individuals, they have to do it all themselves. They do their own marketing. They're not coming out of academies or teams where they're media trained. They're very real, very authentic individuals who have got incredible drive and incredible commitment. A lot like entrepreneurs and business owners who I work with today. And it's kind of ironic. The work I did as a sports journalist led directly to the work I do now with business leaders. Because back around 2015, the magazine that I was working on for Red Bull folded in New Zealand. It's still going around the world, but they weren't earning enough advertising dollars in New Zealand. They pulled the plug on the New Zealand issue. I figured if Red Bull can't make a go of a magazine in New Zealand, then I need to get out of journalism. So I did. One of the last stories that I wrote for Red Bull was about this entrepreneur, a Scottish Australian guy who made a fortune selling pet food of all things in Australia. And he invested $30 million of his money that he earned selling pet food in a world-class racetrack, a motorsport track in New Zealand. I went down to interview him because Red Bull Motorsport, there's that connection between the two. We hit it off and he told me that he was trying to write his life story, that he was trying to write a book. I had never dreamed of writing a book before, no idea of how or if I could even do it. But I put my hand up and I said, listen, if you want somebody to help you write your book, I'd love to be involved. Thankfully, he said yes. 6-8 months later, we had a finished book. My first gig as a ghostwriter. You asked what a ghostwriter is. A ghostwriter is somebody who works with somebody else to tell their story, to write their book. The book went to #1 on the New Zealand bestsellers list. And it just opened my eyes to the opportunity here because since then, I've worked almost exclusively with business owners and founders and entrepreneurs. And almost without fail, all of them have got incredible stories to tell. I love it. It's a privilege. It's a privilege to sit down with somebody doing this podcast. It's a privilege to sit down with somebody and have the excuse to pick their brains and ask questions and learn about what they do and why they do it. So I absolutely love what I do. When I'm not writing, when I'm not telling stories, I'm a family man. I've got 3 wonderful kids, 2 teenagers and a 10-year-old, 2 teenage boys and a 10-year-old daughter. To escape from them and to escape my own head and to escape my office, I go running. I'm a long distance trail runner. I love running and New Zealand is an incredible place to do trail running. I'm heading down to Queenstown in 10 days time to run a 64-kilometer mountain run. Super excited about that. That's my happy place. It just helps me get out of my own head and just think about nothing else. And I love it.
I've done 26 marathon races, nothing longer than the marathon, but it's special. A lot of people just focus on that one day event.
Yes.
But it's the training, it's the preparation. I always bring that back to the business. We only see the successes, like that person you mentioned. Hey, he was with Daniela Rief, the Ironwoman from Switzerland. She is sponsored by Red Bull and many others. It's so much training.
Absolutely. The discipline involved and the commitment and the self-belief it takes to keep going day after day after day. As you say, for events, right? Day. I don't know about you, Suzanne, but I love when you cross the finish line and the months and months of training that have gone into that day kind of flash before your eyes. It's really emotional. I find it really emotional. At least I'm a middle of the pack runner, for sure. I'm not winning medals and I'm not up the top. I'm not up the pointy end of the field. For me, the emotion that you feel when you cross the finish line, knowing the work you've put into it, is just reward enough in itself. That's a superb feeling.
To go back again, people who don't run, they don't know what it takes. This is a generalization, but how many months do you train for a 64 kilometer? And 64 kilometers for the US people is 50 miles, probably, right?
Yeah, somewhere around that. Yeah, somewhere around that. Yeah. How many months do I train? Well, I suppose I've been putting in the miles into my legs for the last kind of 15 years or so. I did my first marathon back in 2006. I think I just turned 30. No, it's probably 20 years now. Around the same time I was writing, coincidentally enough. I started writing as a journalist. I've been doing marathons and trail running since then. For this particular run, I actually got an injury. People will be familiar with running and injuries. I got an injury back in July and August that slowed me down. For the first time ever, I started going to a gym and doing some strength work in September and cut my running back significantly to a couple of days a week. And it's the best thing I've ever done. For anybody who's never done strength work in the gym, it is a game changer for your running.
I could not agree more with you. How much strength do you need or how much running do you need? And sometimes in our head, I need to run more. No, actually we need to run less because we need to be rested for that day.
Absolutely. I found it incredible. Fingers crossed it goes well in 10 days time, but I'm really, really excited about it.
Tell us a little bit more about the storytelling. I saw on LinkedIn, it was how to tell your origin story. I would say I'm from Switzerland. I grew up there. I was a paper girl. And then I came to the US. I came to New York. I learned the good, the bad, and the ugly. And then, okay, what else? How do you prep somebody to tell a cool story?
Okay. Well, obviously, even though people tell me all the time, I've no stories to tell. I've no stories from my life. I'm boring. It's nonsense because we all have stories. We've all lived a life of highs and lows. Your story already exists. It's in your head. You just have to get it out of you and onto the page. I suppose a lot of people stop at the first hurdle. They actually don't even take the time to reflect on the stories from their lives. And they don't realize that maybe they're sitting on an absolute treasure trove of stories that will help explain really, really well what they do, what motivates them, what they're passionate about. And if you can do that, if you can get that across as a business leader, as a business person, as an entrepreneur, you've got a huge head start on everybody else because it really helps you to stand out, figuring out your own story and what makes you uniquely qualified to do what you do. It's absolute gold in terms of your personal brand or your business. I take clients through a process where I try and get them to identify 3 different stories from their lives, 3 different stages. The first is the stories that shape you. Second is the stories that change you. And finally, the stories that confine you. The stories that shape you are obviously those ones up to about the age of 17 or 18, the formative years of your life. For me, for example, I love reading and sports, and I always, as a teenager, wanted to be a sports journalist from the age of about 13. My mum bought me a typewriter when I was 13. And when I do presentations and pitches, I tell a story about that typewriter. And I talk about how my mum recognized something in me before I did, that maybe my love for reading and my love for words could lead somewhere. That's a story that I've identified from my past and I tied it into what I do now. That's where it starts, with the stories that shape you. And not all of us, but most people will be able to find a story somewhere in that period of their life that goes a long way to kind of helping them figure out, geez, that's how I ended up here. That's how it all started. Then the second one that I look for or try to help them identify is a story that changes them. And again, these stories typically can happen at any stage of your life. We can all change significantly no matter what age we are. I firmly believe that. Generally, for a lot of people, big, significant life-changing events happen in your 20s. So trying to identify a big turning point in your life that, again, led you down the road you're on now. You might have come to a fork in the road. You had to take one road that led one direction, but you choose this other road. Telling the story of that moment, trying to really dig into the detail around that moment and what was it that made you choose that particular direction is another story that I think is really valuable. And finally, then the stories that confine you are the stories that have kept you small. The stories that have maybe stopped you kind of putting yourself out there a bit more, maybe prevented you from standing out. Because like most of the people I work with who have these incredible stories about why they started a business, most of them sit on them. They never share them. they default to the standard buttoned up professional kind of bio, and that's indistinguishable from thousands of others in the same industry doing the same job as them. They read exactly the same. They're like clones of each other. Whereas if you can dive into what maybe scares you about what you do, or what challenges you about what you do, and share those kind of stories, again, you're really going to connect with people because you're sharing your vulnerability about, I started off here maybe not knowing enough about what I'm doing now, but I was determined to learn more because I wanted to get better at it because I was so passionate about it. And for me, the one that I tend to share is my fear of public speaking, because I've always been terrified of public speaking.
Interesting.
Yeah, 12 or 13 years ago, I joined Toastmasters to get over that fear. I worked in corporates for a little while in my 20s, and I was crap in corporates because I was terrified of speaking up. Even in a team meeting, I was always kind of the shy kind of one in the corner, not willing to put my hand up. Or accept responsibilities or take on jobs. And so I joined Toastmasters, and I ummed and ahed my way through my first couple of years in Toastmasters. And then I finally got enough confidence to speak for 5 or 10 minutes. And that was me. I thought I was done. But then a couple of years ago, I shared a story about that on LinkedIn, and the president of the Professional Speakers Association of New Zealand reached out to me and said, listen, we've been reading what you've been sharing about storytelling. As professional speakers, we're all storytellers. Would you do a workshop for us and tell us how to find our stories? And he said, it's a 2-hour workshop, so you'd be running this workshop. I'd never dreamed of doing anything like that before. Inside, I was going, no, don't do it.
No,
Run away. I can't do that. But I did. I said yes. And again, life-changing. By changing that story that I told myself about my fear of public speaking, by changing that story and accepting that it was something I could get over, it's opened up so many opportunities. It's led to opportunities like this. It's led to emceeing events. It's led to workshops, and it's a game changer. I think if you can kind of look at the stories that you tell yourself that are stopping you that are stopping you from doing stuff, that are confining you, and flip the script, it's a game changer.
And what was it? What were you afraid of?
I don't know what was holding me back. It's too strange. I don't know what, because once you get up on stage, once you get over those first 1 or 2 times you do, it becomes so much easier. People have said it's one of the most common fears that people have, is that fear of public speaking. But again, I really found that knowing kind of my story and getting up there and having a few personal stories to share really helped me, because here's the thing about sharing a personal story as opposed to maybe getting up in front of a crowd of people, delivering a data heavy presentation, which is all about numbers and a very corporate speak. It's really hard to bring that to life. Whereas if you're sharing a personal story and then talking about how that relates to what you do professionally, that personal story, you're going to come alive because it's a personal story. You don't need a script for a personal story. You've lived it. You've told it probably to your friends many, many times. You have all these little details. You have the emotion. The meaning is there because it's meaningful to you. That's the key, I think, with any story you share in business. If it's memorable and emotional and meaningful to you, then it'll be memorable and emotional and meaningful to your audience. That's the goal.
I think that's the key. And being vulnerable, being ready to share your story. Yeah. Everybody has a different story.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And people can see themselves and identify themselves in your story and the stories that they share. The mistake that a lot of people make is they fear that if they reveal too much of their personality, that they'll put some people off. But that's fine. There's millions of potential customers for you, millions of potential audience. But you're much better filtering the people out and filtering and filtering people in rather than being vanilla. With regard to LinkedIn, as well as posting about storytelling there regularly, occasionally I'll post about running. And 3 of my best running mates now, people that I run with regularly, are from LinkedIn because they reached out off the back of a post I did about running. We connected, and some of them worked with me, some of them didn't, but they've become really good friends because we had that shared passion, that same interest. And I wouldn't have met those people, I don't think, if I hadn't shared a story about running.
And I think running bonds you in a way. I've been a running coach for many years, and you're raw in a way. So as women, we don't put too much makeup on. It rains. You don't look the best. It's not the Instagram moment, but that's what bonds you. You have the best memory when you're sweating and when it's...
Yeah, you can have the best conversations when you're running as well, because you're not looking at the other person, but it's that wonderful shared experience. I find the conversations you can have with good running mates to be some of the best.
You don't need a therapist.
Absolutely. Yeah, you get out of your own head and you share the experience with somebody else. It's such good therapy for sure.
What's the wisdom for 2024 from you?
Wisdom. We've touched on it already. I did a LinkedIn live yesterday called How to Overcome Your Fear of Sharing Stories, because I'm a writer. Well, I'm a writer first and foremost, and that's how I kind of earn my living. I work as a ghostwriter for, as I said, entrepreneurs and founders. I'm just finishing a life story for an incredible New Zealand technology entrepreneur who is 80 years old, overcame dyslexia to build this multi-million-dollar manufacturing company making these huge scale magnets. He's like a savant when it comes to engineering and machining. Incredible story. He's finishing up his book at the moment. Writing is how I earn my living, but I've kind of realized that the first step for most people isn't the actual writing, it's the mindset. It's overcoming the fear of sharing your stories is the first step to actually writing anything. And so I just did a LinkedIn live yesterday. I'm definitely going to do more of them because the response was really good. I encourage people in the LinkedIn live to put their hand up and maybe share a little story of their own. We're all craving the opportunity to tell stories these days, right? Because so many of us are maybe feeling isolated. So few of us maybe have a circle of friends around us that will listen to us, that will listen to our stories. It's more important than ever now, especially with ChatGPT and AI making writing and content creation so easy and so dumbed down. It's going to be more important than ever that we share our stories and that we're willing to go, okay, this is clearly not created by ChatGPT. This is from the heart. This is me. This is who I am, and this is what I stand for. I'm really excited to push that message out there a bit more.
Couldn't agree more with you. So ChatGPT is useful for some things, but certainly not telling our life story. Our life story is unique, and everybody is different and has a unique story to tell. Thank you so much for your wisdom, and good luck with your race.
Thanks, Suzanne. Lovely to chat with you.
What are you taking away? So it's shape, change, and confine. What has shaped you? What did you change? And what is confining? Be vulnerable. Tell your story. Take it from the Ironwoman. We have episodes every Monday. Chime in. We have talks with very interesting people. You can learn from them, connect with them. Don't be shy. And Take It From the Ironwoman is also the book, Global Business Coaching with Sports Parallels. Read it, download it, and enjoy my journey from Switzerland to New York to Kilimanjaro. Thank you for your support and see you next time. Bye-bye.